Now, there were faster and cheaper machines in '97, but while most laptops at the time were rather big and bulky, Toshiba managed to squeeze in some serious specs in this tiny machine. The 300 CT has an Intel MMX 133 MHz and 256K of level 2 cache. It was offered with a 1.5 gig hard drive as standard. The 10.4 active matrix LCD has a 16:9 aspect ratio, which was rather unusual at the time. So the resolution is 1024 by 600 instead of the much more common 1024 by 768. It has 2 megs of VRAM and will display 64K colors at the default resolution. It has a built-in 33.6K modem, so I used it with a 56K PCMCIA card. The sound is excellent on this machine and was produced with an onboard real Yamaha OPL chip. I used to have a thin docking station for it with a built-in CD-ROM, but unfortunately that thing is gone. I do still have the smaller port expander and the original floppy drive, and this machine also has a USB port, so we could easily get stuff on it. Okay, let's see what we will find inside. Let's get that battery off. Behind here I think we should have the hard drive. We do. And it's kind of loose inside here. And it is of course an IDE drive. Yes, we might as well get all the screws out on this side right away. The hard drive is pretty quiet actually. I can hear it seek, but it doesn't make any annoying whining noises. And it's already coming apart. And this screw was slightly thicker. I guess I better keep track of what screw goes where. And next up I think we need to remove this bezel. And the plastics on this machine seems to have aged well. But I'll be careful anyways. Yeah, these plastics are still good. Okay, so let's see how we can get that keyboard out. And I think these connectors are locked in place. Yes, they are. With these 2 tabs. And there are 2 of them. Alright. The Windows logo is a registered trademark. Yeah, this keyboard actually has a Windows key. But it's in a weird position all the way up here in the corner. So I actually never used it. Oh, and by the way, the keyboard is, well, I guess decent. I've definitely seen worse. But it's nothing special. And obviously the keycaps are rather small to fit on this tiny machine. So that enter key is barely larger than a normal key on any other keyboard. But it's an ultra portable, so I'm not complaining. And that tiny little fan is actually very quiet. So overall this is a very nice and quiet machine to work on. Hopefully it's much easier to get apart than my ThinkPad 240. That thing was a pain to take apart with so many clips. But I think this one is a bit easier. And I think it's loose now. And there's a loose screw inside here. So something is broken off. I'll see if I can find where it belongs. What's up with this? It has 2 CMOS batteries. Why Toshiba? I only bought one, so I only have this one prepared for the video. And I didn't know it also had this tiny thing here. Crap. Well, I guess I should order one and replace it later. Why do they have 2 CMOS batteries? That's weird. Never seen that before. So then we have the cable for the display. Here we go. And then we have a second connector for the display. Okay, so this corner here looks a bit suspicious. I wonder if it's cracked. Yes, it is. So I'll see if I can glue that piece back on. Let's get those batteries out. These are VARTA brand, but luckily they have not leaked. And I'm not sure if this type of VARTA actually does leak or not. So if you have a Toshiba with those batteries in, I'd love to know if your batteries have leaked. And yeah, this connector is actually corroded. Yeah, for sure, there is some corrosion going on here. So, good thing we took it apart. There is definitely some corrosion going on this screw here, and this connector here. But I can't see any corrosion on the battery pack. That's a bit odd. And same thing here, so I can't see any corrosion on the battery pack. But the connector is definitely corroded. So I guess we'll take that motherboard out and take a look underneath. And I guess we need to remove the cable for the mouse switches. And something else is holding it in place. Well, that could actually just be the corrosion made it stuck. Let's try to remove this screw here. Yeah, I don't know if the camera picks it up, but there's some pretty heavy corrosion on this screw. The PCB is still stuck. And unfortunately the camera decided to turn itself off and didn't bother to tell me. So the PCB was held in place with this connector here. And we've got some chips here from Toshiba, Alps, and chips. And there is no visible corrosion on this PCB at all. So I think we caught this one on time. And on this PCB here, there is corrosion on this pad here. And this connector here. But I think we're lucky and caught this one on time. So I guess if you have a vintage Toshiba, you should probably take it apart. And get that damn VARTA out of there. I guess I'll move on with the disassembly here, so we can inspect the PCB on the other side too. And I have removed a bunch of screws off camera because I didn't notice that it had turned itself off. So then we have this weird contraption here. And these are some really cheap mouse switches. Nothing fancy here. But I guess they had to use these to make the machine thin enough. There's one more screw underneath this small PCB here. But what is holding this PCB in place? Here we go. Okay, so another connector down here. And I will inspect all the caps, but these look really nice and shiny. So I think the caps are still good on this machine. So this should be the last screw, I think. Yeah, here comes that PCB. Let's check it for corrosion right away. Yeah, there is some minor corrosion here. So we need to get this piece off. And it's probably glued in place. Yeah, there's some really minor corrosion here on these vias. So we're gonna have to do some cleaning here. I guess we might as well clean it up right away. So I've got some vinegar on a Q-tip. And I'll just apply it and wait for a few minutes. And then clean it off with some IPA. Okay, so I left it on for 5 minutes. Let's clean it off. And I am of course going to clean the entire PCB with IPA. Because it's a bit smelly from storage. Yeah, I think that corrosion is gone. But it wasn't much to begin with. So let's do the same thing on this side. So some vinegar. And I'll just leave it on there for a few minutes. So, I forgot to put the microphone on. But what I was saying was, I wonder if this board would work without those BIOS batteries. Because now that I know that these are prone to leak, I wonder if I should put new batteries in here. I don't care too much about the clock on this PC. Oh, and yeah, we have some corrosion on the connector for the second battery as well. So let's give it the same treatment. Yeah, I don't know if you can see that, but there's a clear reaction. So I'll leave it on there for a while too. And it's making tiny bubbles where there is corrosion. Okay, so it's been a few minutes. Time to get that stuff off. Okay, what's next? Okay, let's see if we can get that display off. And this machine has a lot of different screws. So I'll probably have to watch this video myself to be able to put this machine back together. Normally I wouldn't have to disassemble the display, but since this machine is a bit smelly, I kinda have to. And on projects like this, I also take a lot of pictures because it's almost impossible to remember every single screw. So we've got 2 screws hidden behind these 2 stickers. And hopefully the display will come apart now. Now that's a funny looking speaker. And the backlight on this display is still quite decent. It's not perfect, it's actually slightly too bright. But definitely decent. So let's get that connector off that LED driver. And the main connector. And it's a sharp display, made in Japan. Okay, so let's get those hinges off. And then I guess we need to remove that funny looking speaker. And it's too bad I don't have that docking station, because it also has 2 larger speakers in it. And behind this PCB we also have the infrared. And that I actually used back in '97. So I hooked my machine up with infrared to my Nokia 8810, I believe it was called. I'll make a Google and insert an image. And I managed to go out on internet, which felt like an amazing feat. And since it cost a fortune, I only stayed online for 5 minutes. And then I never used that feature again. Mobile internet in '97 was insanely expensive. And the lid is off. So let's just get those cables out. And we should be ready for cleaning. And here's another loose piece. Yeah, taking tons of pictures makes the reassembly so much quicker. Okay, that was the last piece. So I'll clean all the plastic bits and pieces with soapy water. And I'll clean all the PCBs with some IPA. And then we can put the machine back together. Okay, so all the bits and pieces cleaned up really well. And it's no longer a leaky and smelly machine. So let's put it back together. And I almost forgot. We need to put back this piece here. Otherwise, we're going to get a large crack at the back of the machine. And unfortunately, it's not just broken off, it's also cracked. So this hole here is enlarged. And if we try to screw the machine back together, this screw is just going to go right through this hole and not do much at all. So I'm going to break this piece in two where the crack is and then glue it back together, making sure that the hole is going to be in the correct size. And we're also missing a piece, so we only have half of it. So we need to use some baking soda and try to build this piece up. So this is a pretty extensive repair, but let's have a go and see if we can fix it. Alright, so I did just what I said. I broke this piece in two and glued it back together and made sure this hole is much smaller now. And the hole is now much smaller than the head of the screw, so this should work. However, it's not strong enough and there is a piece missing here. So let's add some super glue and make it stronger with some baking powder. And I have used this method quite a few times and it has worked really well for me. This stuff is much stronger than the original plastic. So I just add super glue and baking soda and it hardens to this really strong material. And if you get too much, which we have here, obviously, you can just sand it down or file it down. And in this case, we're going to have to file it down because there is not room enough. I hope this doesn't get overexposed, but this is what it looks like before we file it down. Pretty damn ugly. But in this case it doesn't matter since it's inside the machine. But if you need to, you can make it look pretty just by filing and sanding, and in some cases even respraying. But in this case I'm just going to make sure that it works and keeps the machine together. Alright, so now we have to file this down to get a flat surface. And this stuff is much harder than plastic, so it takes a little while to file down. Yeah, I think that's good enough for this project. But if you're using this method on something more visible, you can make it look much better. But inside this machine, I'd say this is good enough. And if you're filing down baking soda, you're quite likely to use the hoover. And if you do, make sure it doesn't snatch any parts from you. Because I had to crack that damn hoover open and pull this part out. That was no fun. And we're done! The repair of the case worked really well and the machine is now firmly held together, without that large crack at the back. This video is unfortunately too long to include a discussion about how to best get software on vintage laptops, but I have transferred image files of the Broken Sword CDs, and Demon Tools version 347, which I believe is the last version to work in Windows 95. I also have an issue with the scaling to take care of. It will scale properly, but I don't remember how I did it back in 97. I probably need to mess around with the display drivers. So I may make a part 2 about this machine, depending on if this video gets any views and likes. Unfortunately, I don't have the restore CDs or the original drivers for this machine, so I can't make a clean install. If you by any chance know where I can find them, I'd be very interested to know. And now I'm gonna go on a nostalgia trip with Broken Sword on the awesome little 300 CT for the first time in decades. As you can see, the machine will work just fine without those damn VARTA batteries.
As I picked myself up, all I could hear was the ceaseless drone of traffic. Life went on around me. But the explosion was to change my life forever.